On the 3rd of March in 2019, a young woman was waiting in a Walmart parking lot for her boyfriend to return from shopping, when seemingly out of nowhere, she randomly decided to speed off, leaving her boyfriend confused as he stood there with a full shopping cart. The next day, her car was found abandoned on the side of a road, and after searching the surrounding area, her deceased body was discovered lying in a ditch. The exact cause of death was initially listed as accidental. However, the strange circumstances surrounding this case paint a much more sinister picture. So, was this a simple case of a woman suffering with psychosis, or was there perhaps more to the story? This is the mysterious case of Brooke Naylor. Brooke Naylor was born on the 11th of March in 1998 to parents David and Carla Naylor. She grew up in a town called Carmi in Illinois, where she first discovered her love for sports and animals, especially dogs and cats. Not too much is known about Brooke's childhood, but from what I was able to gather, she was a kind and caring person who always put others before herself. So her eventual disappearance was heavily mourned by not only her family, but the entire Carmi community. Brooke was also very intelligent, graduating as a valedictorian in 2016 from Carmi White County High School, where she was a member of the tennis team. And 2 years later, she then went on to graduate again in 2018, this time from Southeastern Illinois College, with an associate's degree in biology. Later in life, Brooke started volunteering at the Carmi Veterinary Clinic, but was also a part-time waitress at Morello's Restaurant and Catering in Harrisburg, which is unfortunately where her story takes a tragic turn. On the morning of March the 3rd in 2019, Brooke started complaining to her boyfriend Cameron that she was having trouble regulating her breathing. After attempting to calm his girlfriend down, he quickly realised that the issue was far more serious, as it had now developed into a full-blown panic attack. At the time, the couple had only been dating for 2 months, so this was Cameron's first time seeing Brooke in this state. But despite her panic, Brooke assured Cameron that she would be fine and asked him to call into her work to explain the situation. Her shift was set to start at 12 PM, so Cameron called into Morello's restaurant to explain that Brooke was in no state to work. However, rather than being met with understanding, the manager was furious, given that this was not the first time Brooke had called in sick to work shortly before her shift was due to start. So, an ultimatum was given. Either Brooke came into work, or she was fired. Well, the 21-year-old was in no position to be unemployed, so she had to quickly compose herself, and Cameron kindly offered to drive her to work. Little was known about her behaviour at work that day, but you could probably assume she wasn't in the best state of mind to be serving customers. Anyway, at around 10 PM, Cameron left to pick up his girlfriend from work, and after collecting her outside the restaurant, she asked if they could quickly go into Walmart to pick up a few things. On the drive over, Brooke put together a list for Cameron, as she was exhausted from work and wanted to wait in the car with her newly adopted puppy. Given that he knew Brooke had just experienced a very difficult day and probably needed her rest, Cameron obliged and was happy to help. He entered the Walmart on his own at approximately 11 PM, and with the list in hand, he scoured the store in search of everything Brooke had asked for. Cameron was reportedly shopping for around 45 minutes and was captured on security cameras using a self-checkout kiosk. Interestingly, however, after exiting the store, he quickly returned to purchase a phone card from a Walmart employee. But if this wasn't suspicious enough, Cameron then decided to enter the store once again, where he would purchase a lighter before leaving the Walmart for a final time. He was then captured standing outside the store looking confused with a full shopping cart, as Brooke and the car were nowhere to be seen. Security footage from the Walmart parking lot managed to capture the exact moment Brooke decided to drive away, which was at around 11:02 PM, just 2 minutes after Cameron had first entered the store. Strangely, the footage showed that she seemed to be following another car at the time, and so after exiting the parking lot, she started travelling north on Route 45, keeping close to the car in front. At 11:24 PM, a man named Jacob, who was the driver of the car Brooke was following, called 911 to report what was happening, and the police directed him to drive towards Ridgeway Police Department so they could investigate the situation. While refusing to give up the chase, Brooke maintained her pursuit and followed Jacob towards the police station, where the chief officer was waiting nearby to intervene. He stopped Brooke and insisted that she follow him so he could ask her some questions, to which she immediately obliged. It was here that Brooke finally explained herself, claiming that she was simply following her boyfriend, who she saw get into another woman's vehicle at the Walmart parking lot. But confused, the officer explained that she had actually been following a different man and had in fact mistaken Jacob for her boyfriend. Well, once the situation was clarified, Brooke apologised for her behaviour and the entire incident was labelled as a simple misunderstanding. So as the police officer was confident Brooke was of sound mind and not under the influence of any alcohol or any other substances, she was eventually released. But while all this was going on, Cameron was spotted on the Walmart security cameras searching the parking lot for the missing vehicle, presumably hoping that Brooke had just moved the car to a different space. However, as it was late, the parking lot was quite empty, so it didn't take long before Cameron realised that the car was gone. He then decided to walk with the shopping cart across the street towards a gas station, thinking that Brooke may have used the opportunity to quickly get some gas for her car. But to his dismay, the car was still nowhere to be found, and so Cameron decided to walk home with the shopping cart. However, as it was a cold night, he eventually had no choice but to abandon the groceries so he could run home instead. After returning home, Cameron attempted to contact Brooke but was unable to get a response from her. But rather than reporting the strange incident, he instead decided to sleep on it, hoping to hear back from her the next day. Well, after waking up to no messages or calls from Brooke, he started to seriously worry and began frantically calling everybody who may know of her whereabouts. He called her work, her family, and even spoke to her neighbours to check if they had noticed her return home the night before. But unfortunately, nobody had seen or heard from Brooke since her disappearance. A missing persons report was then filed, and the official search for Brooke Naylor began. At precisely 9:37 a.m. on Monday the 4th of March, the Illinois State Police located an abandoned vehicle that was parked on the south side of the Ridgeway Eldorado Blacktop, about 200 yards east of Will Road, on a remote field. Upon closer inspection, they noticed that the vehicle's registration plate was a match for Brooke's missing car, but there were some details which alarmed the police. Both the driver's side window and the passenger side window were rolled all the way down, which was suspicious as Brooke was believed to be travelling alone at the time. But the keys were not in the car, implying that whoever left the vehicle abandoned most likely planned to return. At this point, the investigators didn't know what to expect, but were certainly concerned, as to randomly disappear was not normal behaviour for Brooke. The car was eventually taken back to the police station, where they ran tests to check if it had been tampered with at all. However, they were unable to find any evidence, and the gas tank was still a quarter full. The next day, witnesses came forward who shed some more light on the strange events. The first witness reported that about 5:35 a.m. she was on the Ridgeway Eldorado Blacktop and saw a vehicle pulled into a field entrance. The witness was driving slow at the time because of the weather conditions and eventually stopped in the roadway. She then positioned her headlights on the vehicle, noticing that the driver's side window was down, but she could not see anyone inside. She stated that the car was not running and it was parked at a weird angle close to the roadway, as if the vehicle was travelling east. The witness didn't feel comfortable getting out of her car at the time due to the worsening weather conditions and continued driving to work. Local residents then also came forward with cooperating stories, noting that they saw the car parked in the same location at 6 a.m. and 7:15 a.m, and in both instances the car was yet again unattended. Similarly, another observer noted that around 8:45 a.m. Brooke's vehicle was occupied on the same field entrance just by the side of the road, which was around 1 hour before the car was finally discovered by the police. However, unlike the first few witnesses, apparently there was a person in the driver's seat, looking over their shoulder as if they were about to reverse back onto the road from the field entrance. But not thinking too much about it, the witness then continued on her way to work, completely unaware of the mystery that she had just seen. Later, at around 3 p.m, when returning home from work, she encountered the vehicle once again, but this time it was repositioned farther onto the road, implying that someone had moved it during the day. So based on all of the eyewitness reports, police managed to pull together a rough timeline of the day's events. However, despite the evidence that was now stacking up, Brooke Naylor's location was still unknown. 2 days later, on Thursday the 7th of March, a local resident contacted the police at around 11 a.m. to report a disturbing discovery. While undertaking a routine walk of his farm, he suddenly stumbled upon a backpack. It was located on the fence line of his property, but knowing about the missing person case, he didn't tamper with the evidence just in case. When the police arrived at the scene, they opened the bag and discovered a number of items that belonged to Brooke, including her driving license and a baseball cap brandishing her restaurant's logo. After further inspection of the surrounding area, they also managed to find the key to Brooke's car, as well as a dog toy that likely belonged to her newly adopted puppy. It was then presumed that the backpack did in fact belong to Brooke. However, friends and family were never able to officially identify the bag as hers, leaving the door open for potential foul play. After this massive break in the case, search teams and drones were deployed, but to mixed emotions as investigators were unsure what they might find, with Brooke now being missing for over 4 days. Her well-being was seriously brought into question, with many assuming if they did find her, she would likely be deceased given the weather conditions at the time. And then almost exactly 24 hours later, this assumption would be confirmed. At precisely 5:31 PM on Friday the 8th of March, Brooke Naylor's whereabouts were finally confirmed when her body was discovered face down in a ditch. The search party responsible for her discovery claimed that they were alerted to her location by a puppy who was incessantly barking at the group to get their attention. After following the puppy for around 200 yards, they were eventually led to a medium-sized ditch where, upon inspection, they found a young woman's lifeless body. It appeared she had fallen into the pit at some point over the previous few days, so they were almost certain that they had found Brooke. But following procedure, they called in the Illinois State Police to officially identify the remains. Well, after the police arrived, they immediately identified the body as Brooke Naylor, and her family and friends were contacted shortly after to deliver the bad news. Although this result didn't come as too much of a shock to her family, given the evidence that had been collected during the week. Nevertheless, Brooke's mother, Carla, was understandably distraught by the news. Brooke's father, David Naylor, refused to give an interview, but simply stated the result of the case was truly devastating and calmly requested that his family be given their space. Soon after the discovery, the Illinois State Police transported Brooke's body to the lab so they could conduct a thorough autopsy to help uncover the true nature of her passing. An SA kit was completed to see if she had been taken advantage of at all during the period of her disappearance. However, the results came back inconclusive. Her body showed no signs of physical trauma despite being found inside a ditch covered in mud and debris. She had suffered some bruising on her knees, but it was impossible to decipher whether these bruises had occurred due to accidentally falling or by a potential suspect. Also, she was noticeably skinny when they found her. However, this was typical of Brooke, as she had always been on the slimmer side. Her cause of death was later listed as hypothermia, due to the cold environment, as on the night that she first disappeared, the temperature was measured at just 11 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 11 degrees Celsius, meaning she would have likely perished on the same night that she disappeared. But the question still remained, why was she walking around on her own in the middle of the night during one of the coldest days in the year? Was she running from someone perhaps? Well, to help find the answer, a toxicology report was also conducted to see if there were any mind-altering substances in her system. Brooke had no history of drug use, so it was expected that the report would come back negative. However, to everyone's surprise, large amounts of methamphetamine and fentanyl were found in her system, which were quickly ruled as the cause of her mysterious behaviour that night. Due to these findings, the case was quickly labelled as a substance-related accident and no further investigations were conducted. But with so many strange circumstances surrounding this case, was there perhaps more to this story? Now, when it comes to cases such as these, the first person the police look to is usually the spouse, which in this case was her boyfriend of 2 months, Cameron. However, for reasons unknown, he was quickly ruled out as a suspect by the police. His strange behaviour on the night of Brooke's disappearance definitely raised some red flags. Firstly, he entered the Walmart 3 times and took 45 minutes to pick up a few things for his girlfriend, who was waiting patiently in the car. Secondly, upon realising his girlfriend had left, rather than calling a cab or an Uber, he instead chose to walk home and later abandon a shopping cart full of groceries in freezing conditions. This surely wasn't the behaviour of an innocent man, and so many people were quick to point the finger at Cameron. Now, although he has been cleared as a suspect, I still have my suspicions as it has never been revealed as to why he was so quickly ruled out as a suspect. I think the premise of a cover-up is rather far-fetched, as there didn't seem to be any ties between Cameron and the Illinois Police Department. However, there is still a possibility he could have been involved in another way. Cameron had only been dating Brooke for 2 months, so the fact he was already driving her to and from work was certainly uncommon at best. He was also calling up Brooke's work on her behalf, which is either the act of an extremely supportive boyfriend, or possibly a man who is trying to cover something up. Perhaps he was a bad influence on Brooke and had slowly introduced her into the world of substance abuse, leading to a downward spiral that ultimately resulted in her death. Maybe that morning, before she tried to call in sick for work, she wasn't having a panic attack, but rather was having a negative reaction to the substances they had been taking the night before. Now, this is quite the stretch and is purely based in conjecture alone, but why else was Brooke acting so irrational that night, immediately after finishing her shift at work? Although this perhaps leads to another possible suspect. So let's say Cameron wasn't responsible for Brooke's sudden personality change, and she was in fact an anxious person that struggled with real panic attacks regularly. But if that is in fact the case, how else did she end up with methamphetamine and fentanyl in her system? Perhaps a work colleague is to blame. The theory goes, she finishes her shift and while waiting for Cameron to pick her up, she shares a few hits of something with a friend from work. Maybe she knows what's in there, or maybe she doesn't. Either way, she chooses not to tell Cameron as she doesn't want him to know, and they drive to the Walmart as planned. But seeing that Brooke is acting strange and is clearly tired from her day, he offers to go in for her while she rests in the car. But little does he know, Brooke is suffering from episodes of paranoia, and when she spots a man that looks similar to Cameron getting into a car with another woman, she overreacts and chases after him. However, the main hole in this theory is that if she was in fact under the influence, shouldn't the police officer who pulled her over and brought her back to the station have noticed she was high? Also, police interviewed everyone she worked with and came back empty-handed. As far as they could tell, there was nobody who worked at the restaurant who would have fit this theory, and even if they did, everyone had a confirmed alibi for where they were that night, and so the pieces just didn't quite fit together. But what if she was of sound mind all the way up until the police station, and then at some point between getting released and abandoning her car on the side of the road, she picked up some substances herself, or maybe even had a person with her at the time? These were also questions asked by the Illinois State Police, but with the little evidence at hand, there was absolutely no proof that Brooke had spoken to anyone after she left the station that night. But what about the sighting of a person driving her car at 8:45 AM the day after her disappearance? The assumption was that this was Brooke, but what if it was somebody else? Perhaps the same person who sold her the substances and maybe even the person responsible for her death. Well, once again, this was a theory pondered by the police, but with little evidence other than an unconfirmed sighting. There was no real weight to this theory, and therefore it was not pursued. Also, due to the poor weather conditions at the time, it's very possible that this driver simply made a mistake, maybe thinking the headrest was a person. But either way, it is certainly an interesting piece of evidence that may help explain the strange choices made by Brooke that night. So, what's the consensus here exactly? Brooke Naylor's death was ruled as an accident, so was Brooke really just a troubled 20-year-old who was struggling with substance abuse and anxiety, leading her to make a terrible decision while under the influence? Well, this certainly wouldn't be the first time, with the infamous case of Elisa Lam and the Cecil Hotel being a key example. A girl who is suffering from a mental disorder behaves extremely irrationally and somehow ends up taking her own life by accident. But the difference between the Elisa Lam case and Brooke Naylor is that Brooke was well enough to convince a police officer she was capable of driving herself home. Also, she had completed an entire shift at work with all of her colleagues saying she was behaving as normal and was able to correctly operate a car during difficult weather conditions in the middle of the night. Now, I'm not saying this proves she was a victim of foul play, as it is still very much possible that she did in fact cause this incident herself. The strange scene where she chased after another car may have just been her anxiety, and then she may have purchased the substances later. But with the case being wrapped up so quickly after the autopsy was conducted, with no real investigations into why she had these illegal substances in her system, I can't help but wonder, Was something missed here? It's possible that Illinois State Police knows something we don't, and had very good reason to wrap it up so quickly. But until we see that evidence, I would personally like for this case to be reopened and investigated again. Anyway, I think I'll wrap this video up before I continue diving down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. But I hope you found the story interesting, and if you do have any theories of your own, feel free to leave them down in the comments below, as I would love to read them. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check out our previous true crime documentary on screen now, where we cover the story of Brittany Drexel, a girl who was missing for 13 years until her case was finally solved.